Well, there's been a lot of talk about why that Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner went down over in India. And as a retired United States Air Force pilot, I flew from 1970 to 1995. And one of the planes I flew was a Boeing 720B. I happen to think that's the safest airplane that Boeing ever made, but that's my opinion. So I'm giving my opinion based on that aircraft. Now, the 787B is a very unique airplane. The things that control it are hydraulics and electricity. And you've got a lot of hydraulics on that plane. Everything flies by hydraulics and electricity. So when you're getting ready to take off, there's one of the things you have to do is set the flaps. Now, the flap setting for that aircraft are 5 degrees or 15 degrees. Normal takeoff is 5 degrees. You use 15 if you got a shorter runway, but you have to determine your liftoff speeds, your takeoff speeds, your V1 speeds, rotate speeds, and what have you, based upon your weight and the conditions around the aircraft, and a bunch of other stuff. But so pilot's rolling down the runway. It's going to reach a speed called V1. And the co-pilot will say, V1, that's your commit speed. The next speed the co-pilot's going to call out to the pilot is VR. That's a rotate speed. Pilot pulls back on the yoke about 15 degrees to raise the aircraft indicator on his FT 109 or whatever he happens to be using. Pull it up to the indices, set it right there. That's where the plane is going to launch. So you got it there. Plane's going to go up. Plane's going to start leaving the ground. And when you're getting up, you see the gauges are showing you're up in the air. Gear up. That's the next thing you're going to do when you're positive rate of climb. That's what you're getting. Positive rate, gear up. The co-pilot reaches over, pulls up the gear. That aircraft that you saw, that 787, that gear never went up. And that got me to thinking, why didn't the gear go up? Because he was about 600 feet up in the air. That gear should have been stowed a long time ago. Well, here's one possibility that happened. This is a possibility. What if when the pilot said, gear up, and instead of the gear, the co-pilot mistakenly went flaps up? Now, if you raise the flaps at that early in the takeoff, that airplane ain't going to want to fly anymore. It's going to start settling down. It's going to start dropping down because it doesn't have enough airspeed to fly. It needs that flaps to create greater lift on the wing. So if the co-pilot made a mistake and saying, instead of positive rate, gear up, he did positive rate and he brought the flaps up, that aircraft's going to start sinking. Now, that was my first inclination, thinking that's what happened. And I went, yeah, that's a reasonable thing, thinking the co-pilot screwed up. Instead of putting up the gear, because the gear was never up, put up the flaps. Flaps up, that plane ain't going to want to fly. It's going to sink. And it did. That was my first thought. But then I learned something else that made me think something else. And here's what I'm going to say my second idea, miss. They took off, and what happened was the pilot issued a mayday call shortly after takeoff saying lost thrust, no thrust. Well, if you've got no thrust on an aircraft, it ain't going to keep going up. It's going to lose its speed. If it loses its speed, it's going to start sinking. Now, why would it lose thrust? Well, apparently, if you look at the history of that aircraft, apparently it had some emergency landings. I don't know what the reason was. I haven't seen the records, so I don't know. But there were people on that aircraft that said inside the aircraft, the air conditioning wasn't working, the TVs weren't working, even the call light for the stewardess or the flight attendant wasn't working. Something was going on with the electrical system. And the electrical system, if that aircraft wasn't working properly, is it possible that the electrical system on that aircraft failed on takeoff, some way, shape, or form? Now, there's a lot of backups on that aircraft, a lot of backups. And you got the engines, you got the centerline stuff. But if something happened, was already bad before they even started going, and it gave out, that might explain something. And then the last thing I heard, someone said, and there's pictures to indicate this, that the rat may have been deployed. And you're saying, rat? What's a rat? Rat is a ram air turbine. And it's located under the aircraft. You got to be careful when you're walking around. You don't want to be under that thing, whatever comes out. But it's a turbine, and it's got propeller on it. And what it does, it gets down into the slipstream, the air, and the propeller starts spinning. Well, that spinning creates electricity. Now, that's a That's an adjustable pitch prop on that wrap, and it spins at a certain rate. But it does spin. It creates electricity, which is a backup for the pilots to use in case that they need, well, hydraulic pressure and they need electricity to make the airplane fly, because the 787 flies on two things: electricity and hydraulics. Well, that ram has got enough, doesn't have enough power to let you pull the gear up. Can't do that because that's a lot of electricity it takes to get that done. But it allows the pilot to fly. And if the rat had been, if it had been exposed, those happen in emergencies, folks. That happens when you lose power. That rat drops down and starts functioning to give the pilot power. So now I'm beginning to think maybe, just maybe, that aircraft suffered a severe power loss. And the fact that the aircraft wasn't powered on the inside, the air conditioning, the lighting, the TV, and even the attendant calls button wasn't working, that tells me that something was wrong electrically in that aircraft. Now they have the black boxes, and they will be able to determine something that was going on, and they should be able to determine what happened, because when that plane crashed, it was probably doing about, I'm saying, around 160 knots, approximately. Everybody was killed on the aircraft, and people were killed on the ground except one individual. He was seated in flight 11, seat row 11A. That's where he was seated, right next to the escape hatch. They're all over the airplane. A lot of people don't like sitting next to that because they have additional responsibilities. But he sat there, was able to get out that escape hatch and get free. Only person who survived. And when the good Lord wants you, he's going to take you. And apparently at that moment, the good Lord didn't want him. So they're saying roughly 290 people died when you consider the folks on the ground, the 242 in the plane, souls on board. But right now I was thinking maybe it was a problem that the co-pilot put up the flaps instead of the gear. But now with that Ram Air Turbine coming down, you can almost see it in video. Something tells me I think it was loss of power. And if they lost complete power on the airplane and the rat comes out, it ain't going to fly, folks. It's going to come down. And at that speed, takeoff, you're heavy. Well, it's a one-way ticket, and the ticket ain't good. I'm just telling you my observation on it. They will find out soon enough. But now you know my take on what I think probably happened to the Air India Flight 171, Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Crashed on takeoff. And is there a problem? They're going to find out. And if there is, this could be a really big issue with the Dreamliner.